Good morning and welcome to Sports Rehab with your host, Ryan Fleming. We're going to break down the Buffalo Bills at Detroit Lions game, which was total offense domination on both sides of the ball. We're also going to break down the college football playoff bracket and matchups, talking about the first time ever having a 12-team playoff format in college football. It's going to be an exciting morning. Looking forward to talking to everybody and going over these exciting matchups in the college football format, and also talking about a little more of the NFL and the impact we're going to see on this offensive juggernaut, the Detroit Lions, versus Josh Allen and the electrifying Buffalo Bills that are really streaking and hot right now. So let's get into this. Buffalo Bills at the Detroit Lions game, which took place Sunday afternoon, December 15th. We'll get into that point of the season where all of these games are huge and really matter towards playoff seedings moving forward into the playoff race. Now, this took place, like I said, in Detroit. Very tough place to play. The only loss Detroit had on the season was against Tampa Bay, but it was at home, but that was very early in the season. So Detroit's a very tough team to beat at home, and Dan Campbell always talks about grit and how their team just keeps bouncing back from injuries. And injury would be an understatement because currently the Detroit Lions have 21 players on IR. Yes, you heard it correctly, 21 players on IR. And most of them are on defense. So it is fascinating and astounding what they've been able to do on the defensive side of the ball and still keep winning games regardless of all the injuries. So give their defensive coordinator a lot of credit, and obviously Dan Campbell and the rest of his staff at the next man up thought process and continuing to move forward. Now, we all know Detroit has that Sonic and Knuckles 1-2 punch with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery at running back that can really hurt you on the ground, but also in the passing game. Jared Goff, their quarterback of Detroit, is extremely good at dumping the ball off to these running backs when he's getting blitzed under pressure. And then the offensive line just does a great job blocking down the field so they can get lots of yak, yards after catch. Detroit has the number one offense in points per game in the NFL. Buffalo has the number two offense in the NFL as far as that goes. So this is truly something to see if you like offenses and lots of points. And it definitely did not disappoint. Jared Goff was on the Rams, and then in a trade sent him to the Detroit Lions, where he's at now, and swapped out for Matthew Stafford, who went to the Rams, and in his first year there won a Super Bowl title for the Rams. But it's now the Lions that are the talk of the league, with Dan Campbell, who's done a phenomenal job changing the culture of that team and really putting them in Super Bowl contention. Now, this game, straight up offense, as I mentioned earlier, lots and lots of points. Buffalo has a very interesting stat. They are the only team, other than the 1966 Giants, who they've just joined, in NFL history to score 40-plus points and give up at least 40 points in consecutive games. Like I said, the only time that's ever happened before is the 1966 New York Giants. So that's a crazy statistic. It's been a long time. Back to the Lions' injury woes. We had 3 more Lions players in this game got placed on IR after this, which makes that total 21. Carlton Davis, their best corner, broke his jaw, who is certainly going to be a huge deficit that they're going to miss. But they've continued to just chug along each week, injury after injury. Obviously, Aiden Hutchinson, their best player on defense, he says, if y'all just get me back to the Super Bowl, I will play in that Super Bowl. So that would be an insane thing if it happened, that he would be back that quickly. But Detroit's got barely a little bitty hanging by a thread on this number one seed now in the NFC, which would really benefit them with that first round bye and home field advantage throughout. Now, James Cook in this game, Buffalo Bills running back, would rush for 105 yards on 14 carries, 2 touchdowns, 7.5 yards a clip. Detroit really struggled stopping him, and I think missing a lot of that interior run defense really, really hurts them moving forward. Both of these quarterbacks, like I said, MVP conversation, didn't disappoint in this game either. Jared Allen, 362 passing yards, 68 rushing yards, 2 passing touchdowns, 2 rushing touchdowns. Really solidified that he's the MVP moving forward and at this point. But that remains to be seen how it'll end up at the end of the year. Jared Goff, 494 yards passing. Yeah, almost 500 yards passing. 5 passing touchdowns. He threw it 59 times because they were down this entire game. Never had the lead. But to have almost 500 passing yards and 5 passing touchdowns, and then the team ends up losing still to Buffalo, is pretty crazy. Considering against the Houston Texans, he had 5 interceptions, and they ended up winning that game. Goff was sacked 3 times. Allen was not sacked at all in this game. So again, the offensive line protected for Buffalo, although Detroit statistically has the best offensive line in all of football, I truly believe. Now, the bright spots for Detroit, obviously their wide receiver, Amon-Ra St. Brown, 14 catches, 193 yards and a touchdown. That's 13.8 yards a catch, which is just fantastic. Time of possession, though, Buffalo led this one by 5 minutes. And once again, like I said, they led the entire game. Now, Detroit got close, and then Buffalo just had an answer every single time. The Lions could not keep Josh Allen inside the pocket, and he just killed them running outside and extending plays to open up passes down the field. That's really how they generated a ton of their offense. Josh Allen bootlegs, running outside the pocket, and then finding people open. It was a huge problem for Detroit all day, and a big part of why they just could not get the lead in this one. Bad news on the injury front. David Montgomery, that part of that 1-2 punch, Sonic and Knuckles for Detroit, tore his MCL and is now out. Good news is he's going to try to rehab it without surgery, so he could potentially be back later on in the postseason. As I mentioned earlier, Aiden Hutchinson wants to play if they make the Super Bowl, but injuries like this can be a big part of what might keep them from there. You've got Minnesota literally tied with you now in the division, nipping at your heels for that number 1 seed. And let's not forget about the Philadelphia Eagles, who also have the same record as you now, who probably have the most complete, healthiest roster in all of football. This game did not disappoint, but Detroit never could get the lead, as I mentioned earlier, so you just couldn't punch it in when you needed to, and you couldn't stop Josh Allen. And that was really the difference in the game. The one that boggles me the most would be in the fourth quarter with 12 minutes to go when Dan Campbell decided to kick an onside kick, and you're down 10, but you've got 12 minutes. Buffalo catches the onside kick attempt and returned it almost all the way for a touchdown, and a couple plays later ended up scoring on that drive. I would argue that Dan Campbell did not make the right call there. I would have just kicked it off, but I can understand your defense could not stop a nosebleed. Josh Allen was doing whatever he wanted in that game, so I get why they tried to do the onside there with that much time left in the game. It's going to be interesting to see the last few games of this season who ends up with that number 1 seed. Buffalo is still a couple of games behind Kansas City, even though they beat them head-to-head, and that's Kansas City's only loss this year by 9 points. Welcome back to Sports Rehab, brought to you by yours truly, Ryan Fleming. The NCAA College Football 12-team playoff format. It's finally happening, and we're about to see something that I think is the best thing they've ever had for college football. There will be 4 games for the first round. There's also 4 teams that get a first round bye. And in this case, drum roll please. Those 4 teams with the first round bye are Arizona State at 4, Oregon at 1, Boise State at 3, Georgia at 2. So they all go straight to the quarterfinals. They don't have to play in this first game, which is a huge advantage. Now, the teams that will have to play are 12 Clemson at 5 Texas. That's a huge matchup. I think Texas wins that. I think they have one of the best defenses in the whole country, 2 very solid running backs. Now, Quinn Ewers, is there quarterback controversy with him and Archie Manning? Most say there's not, but others would say they'd like to see Archie Manning in there just because of his athleticism and dual threat with his legs, which Ewers doesn't really have, and I think that ankle injury is still affecting Ewers a bit. But for now, the time being, Ewers is the man. 9 Tennessee at 8 Ohio State at the Shoe. And that's something I didn't mention. All of these first-round games, there will be played at home for the higher seed. The better seed will get the home game. So this will be at the Shoe, Tennessee, Ohio State. Both these teams are very closely matched, but I think freshman Jeremiah Smith, a wide receiver from Ohio State that leads the team in receiving yards, could be the difference in this game. Ryan Day is kind of on the hot seat, I would say, after losing to Michigan for the 4th straight time. So advancing here in the tournament and ultimately getting to the championship is pretty big for him. Then we have 11 SMU at 6 Penn State. I would say Penn State should take this one pretty handily, but give SMU credit for getting to this point and having a heck of a season. I also think Ohio State will beat Tennessee. I mentioned that earlier, them playing. We have 10 Indiana and 7 Notre Dame in South Bend, Indiana. What a season for Indiana. The AP Coach of the Year. They have just done a fantastic job. What a turnaround. Looking forward to a bright future for them, but I think Notre Dame will be too much for them. And we'll take this one just with their great quarterback play, coaching. I think they have the experience. The moment, will it be too big for Indiana? We're going to find out on that. Now, the winner of Clemson, Texas, will get to go play Arizona State. Arizona State's a 4. They have surprised a lot this year. Many predicted they would finish last in their conference, so they have surprised and shocked a lot of people. We'll see. I've got Clemson losing to Texas, but Texas sometimes has problems and stalls on offense. That's been a big thing. Texas will be without Isaiah Bond, their speedy 4.3 speed wide receiver for that game. But whoever wins that, Arizona State. Oregon's the number 1 team in the whole country. We all know that. They have not lost a game this season. They're the only team that has not lost a game this season, with the stud left-handed quarterback Dylan Gabriel behind center. Oregon would host the winner of that Tennessee-Ohio State matchup. So I think potentially it's going to be Oregon versus Ohio State, but we'll find out next week. Could be Tennessee. Georgia would host the winner of Indiana at Notre Dame, so I think Notre Dame will play Georgia. Of course, we know Georgia has beat Texas twice, once in the regular season and then in the SEC championship. That's why Texas has to play week 1 instead of having a bye week, basically, and Georgia has that spot because they lost to Georgia. Boise State, they're the 3. Heck of a season this year. They will host the winner of SMU Penn State, which again I think will be Penn State. Boise State, need we say more about Ashton Jeanty? 2,497 rushing yards, 27 touchdowns. Almost Barry Sanders-like numbers when he played for Oklahoma State. Just unreal, like a video game cheat code. He was right behind Travis Hunter in the Heisman voting. A lot of people thought he should have won the Heisman. Of course, Travis Hunter from Colorado, the dual position player, wide receiver and defensive back or corner, won the Heisman, but Jeanty, many thought, should have won it, so he is going to be a problem in these playoffs, I believe. Well, folks, that's it for this week. It's been a pleasure, and as always, stay tuned for more Sports Rehab from Ryan Fleming. Everybody have a good rest of your week, a great weekend, a happy holidays, and I am insanely excited for all of these matchups moving forward with the college football playoff games. And as we're getting to the end of the NFL season, where playoffs are looming, who will be the Super Bowl king this year?